Draft Countdown Podcast is back for another season. Who's ready to join us? Tonight, we're going to talk about week 0. We're going to talk about a few other things involving the 2025 NFL Draft. And at some point in time, Pigskin Paul is going to join me, and we're going to talk about all the new formats coming up next on the Draft Countdown Podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's edition of the Draft Countdown Podcast, the Season 4 premiere episode of the Draft Countdown Podcast. I'm your co-host, Brian Bosarge, joined tonight by my co-host, Pigskin Paul Gilmet. Paul, we are 246 days, 23 hours, 56 minutes, and 57 seconds away from the 2025 NFL Draft.
Too long, man, too long. When you get to my age, you don't look way too far ahead.
Well, that's true. You know, you are a few years my senior. That is a fact. But 2025 draft, a lot of changes here at Draft Countdown. And, we're going to get into that in just a second. But first things first, got to get through the spiel. And if you're new to the channel, you've come across this, however, especially on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you get notified when we go live each and every week. If you're following on Twitter/X, give us a subscribe there as well. And if you're a member of our Discord, thanks for being there. If not, go to draftcountdown.com. Top right corner of the search bar, there is a link to join the Discord there. Paul, I mentioned we've got some new happenings here. Changes afoot at the Draft Countdown. For those of you who haven't been following the news, normally in the last 3 years, my co-host for this each and every week has been Shane P. Hallam. Shane is now a rank and file member of Draft Sharks and no longer contributing the daily content to Draft Countdown. And that meant that the Draft Countdown podcast had to change. So I made the executive decision to kind of change it up a little bit. And instead of having one big hour-long show like we've done for the first 3 years of the reboot here of Draft Countdown, we're now going to split it up Tuesdays and Thursdays. And Tuesday will be a college football and NFL draft specific podcast where I will have a rotating co-host each and every week. This week, Paul. Next week, we'll have Miranda Wilhelm's going to join us and others going forward each and every week. And on Thursdays, we will be launching our newest podcast called Countdown to Sunday. That will be an NFL and fantasy specific podcast where I will have a perma co-host, and that will be Brad Menendez, who you all know from Draft Countdown already. And as well as I will have, maybe not weekly, but often I will have what we'll now call in Draft Countdown 101s. The first episode of that was released yesterday, where I had Pete Smith of Orange and Brown Report came on to talk about the AFC North. Recording another one of those tomorrow. So we'll have that as additional content on YouTube. And Brad has just been hammering the YouTube shorts out there. Great stuff there for us, especially for you fantasy guys who follow along at Draft Countdown. Good stuff there. Paul, are you excited about the new format here?
Sure. Why not? Let's do it. Let's just talk and think and speculate about football. It's football time.
It is football time, and we're going to get to week 0 of college football here that gets started on Saturday. we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get to it. But we are a draft podcast. So I figured, what a better time than any now, Paul, especially to get your take, your early thoughts. I know you've compiled your notes over the summer and, from guys left over that you watched last year. But what are your early takeaways about the 2025 NFL draft class?
It looks to me, and it is early, no doubt about it, but I am anticipating that we'll have I think there will be more talent. It won't be as stacked at quarterback, I don't believe at all. I would suspect we might go back to the usual 3 or 4 guys will make the first round, but they're not going to be 6 guys in the top 12 or something like that. However, there are other places, I think, somewhat because the NCAA granting of the COVID extra year of eligibility or free year, however you want to put it, I was surprised. There were a lot more guys that didn't go into last year's draft than I anticipated there would have been. The depth was not what we've been used to. We obviously still have to sort through how big an impact nil is going to have on guys going, if you're going to be a 4th or 5th or 6th round pick and you're already getting a free car and $1 million and God knows what else, you're better off to stay in college because the NFL minimum, is just shy of $1 million a year. So why not stay in school, play around a little bit if you got good friends and you really want to get a degree, which some of these guys do, believe it or not. But there are some groups, as I mentioned in my Tuesday with Pigskin this morning, the defensive tackle, interior defensive line group is just incredible. I haven't seen this many 320 to 330 pound guys, some of whom can run under 5.0 in a 40-yard dash. I haven't seen that for a while. So I think we're going to get closer. And I think we'll find out tomorrow. Brian has inside sources, folks, but we'll find out tomorrow. I expect by far from what I've heard from you and the hints that Mr. Nagy has been dropping at the Senior Bowl website, this is going to be absolutely the largest list that they have ever put out. And time has proven they're not wrong very often over at the Senior Bowl these days. So I think it's going to be loaded, and it will be worth staying up on the 3rd day of the draft next April because there will be quality players that are still sitting there in the 6th and 7th round. So I'm excited. And obviously we know some guys are going to come out of the woodwork that we didn't expect. So I think it's going to be more fun than it was last year, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I know a lot of people, the word was the 2024 draft. The depth wasn't there because of all the guys going back. Well, yep. This is the last year of the free COVID year. So This is it. We can now get back to normalcy, I guess, as far as classifications and all that eligibility, and we'll know who's eligible for the draft and who's not, going into the 2026 draft. So that'll be good for people like us,
yes,
who have a hard time keeping up with this stuff. Our man Fred Purdue in the chat saying, "What's up, guys?"
Hey, Fred.
Good to see you, Fred, buddy. There, been a guest on the podcast a few times. But yeah, to get back to the 2025 draft, Paul, I don't think we're going to have to wait till pick 15 in the first round of the 2025 draft to see our first defensive player come off the board.
No, I don't know. In fact, that good point, Brian. That's another aspect that looks clear to me that this will be weighted reasonably heavily towards defensive players. The only position group I've seen that doesn't look real exciting on defense is the safety group. Yeah. There's only a couple of guys that are going to go in the top 100 from safety, but boy, linebackers, edge, defensive line, which I already mentioned, cornerbacks is a good group. And if these guys know they're going in the top 100, I don't think too many of them are going to stay in college for nil money.
Yeah, I'm looking at my edge rankings right now, and I can tell you I've got 26 guys on my board right now, and I think all of them are going to get drafted. Just a cursory look. You mentioned the defensive tackles. I mean, this is a deep group. I think you're going to get talent probably into day 3. There's some good linebackers out there this year. Corner is definitely good at the top.
Yes,
that's a fact. You mentioned safety outside of Malachi Starks. I'm not sure there's any safety right now that I would pencil in round 1. Maybe you'll see a guy emerge. I'll actually have 2, I think, in my mock draft coming out tomorrow for those of you who are looking for the first mock draft of this year on Draft Countdown. That will be dropping tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. I only have 3 quarterbacks in the first round. I didn't want to put 3, but I think that's where I ended up with. I'm not overwhelmed by this quarterback group, but I think there's a couple of guys that could, like you mentioned earlier, could emerge. Is there any other, I mean, outside of wide receiver, because I know wide receiver seems like it's loaded every year.
Yeah.
So we could talk about that every
come out of the woodwork.
year. Right. Is there any other position group on offense that we haven't talked about that you like some guys at?
It looks like a pretty good year again for offensive tackles. The only thing that I saw that might preclude a propensity for a huge number is that we got an awful lot of guys that are playing tackle in college, and they're 6'3", 6'3.5", 6'4", and not always, but in most cases, you see them projected eventually as being guard players or even center. Look at Graham Barton from Duke this year. You know, he's probably already won the starting center job for the Buccaneers. So I think we've got another good, if not great, but a good offensive tackle class. I think by the time it's done, I think we're going to really like, and it won't be first round. And Brian will smile and say, yeah, you just can't draft a running back in the first round. But I think there will be another very good group second and third round, second day, and then early on the third day. Like I said, the talent's out there. And I think what makes me feel a little more confident when I say that these days is, as Brian knows, and some of you who follow regularly know, Pigskin Paul has become a big fan of athletic freaks and athleticism and traits and all the other things you want to call it. Let's just say I'm still dissecting the freaks list from The Athletic that Mr. Friedman puts up, and that's always a gas to look at. That really is.
Yeah, I haven't looked at it yet. I've got it queued up. I'm going to basically consume it at the time, because you mentioned earlier the Senior Bowl is going to release their watch list tomorrow. Yep. They announced on the socials today. I had heard local radio here that Jim Nagy has said they're going to have 800 plus guys.
Yeah, that's like triple what they had last year,
right?
Isn't it?
It's double. I want to say they had 400 guys, but he said as they went through all their cross checks and everything, he said they just couldn't leave anybody off.
Yeah.
And with the advent of being able to take underclassmen now,
yep,
the list balloons a little bit. But it's going to be interesting to see that list when it comes out tomorrow. So everybody stay tuned to your social medias there. Senior Bowl. I'm quite sure you'll see that if you follow any social media accounts on X there, you're going to see that Reese's logo a lot tomorrow.
Yeah. Yep. They'll
guaranteed.
And you should. If you're not following them, if you're not following us, if you're not following Over the Cap and a few other of the specialized spots, you're not a hardcore draftnik anymore.
I love how Paul in his old age has finally decided to dive into some of the analytics and the athletic testing and all that. It consumed him so late.
Change or die.
That's a fact. All right. So I mentioned earlier, week 0, college football. a modest 7 games on the slate this week. Only 4 games involving FBS teams. We're going to talk about 2 of those games that involve FBS versus FBS and one other. But Paul, we're going to start with obviously the game of the week, if you will, is Florida State and Georgia Tech. They're going to kick this baby off at noon Eastern from Dublin, Ireland.
Yep.
On Saturday. Florida State, this team looks like they are reloaded for another run at the ACC here. And it starts with the quarterback transfer. You're going to hear the quarterback transfer a lot as we go through all these each and every week. But DJ Uyangole, formerly of Clemson, formerly of Oregon State, now the starting quarterback at Florida State, looked like he was making a lot of progress last year at Oregon State. Anxious to see if he can kind of get that going again this week. For Georgia Tech, this team, I feel like they're at some point going to have to make the jump under Brent Key, the head coach there. But this team situated in Atlanta should be just loaded with talent. I think they're a little overmatched here, but they have a couple of guys to watch out for. Transfer from Penn State on the defensive line, Jordan Vandenberg. I have been a fan of their corner, Miles Brooks, in the past, but back to Florida State, the 2 edge rushers to circle here. Patrick Payton, who entered the transfer portal, then pulled back, I thought could have been in contention to be a first-round pick a year ago, if not definitely a day 2 pick. And Marvin Jones Jr., a name very familiar to Florida State fans because his dad was a stud linebacker back in the 90s. One of the better,
a nice pro career too.
Yes, with the Jets, right? One of the best to ever do it at Florida State. But his son, an edge rusher, started at Georgia, didn't get on the field a lot, but now transfers over to the Noles, 6'5", 257. Anxious to see him on the field coming up Saturday. What's your thoughts on these guys and some of the other players, Paul?
I'll tell you what, the thing that I would encourage our viewers and readers to check out, if you're watching the games, you watch this one. And I don't think they're going to give out free beer this year. Ran into a few problems last year with the free beer at the game in Ireland. So I think they're going to cut back on the freebies. But knowing the Irish, they'll find it somewhere, even if they have to pay for it. But I would say the thing that I will be watching closely is, and we aren't sure who's going to come out and all that gamesmanship, but I would say that watching this game, if you're really watching for draft prospects, watch the Florida State defensive line, because I'm going to come out and say it right now, whether it's all in the next draft or the draft after, all their top 6 guys, counting their first 2 off the bench, are probably going to be in the NFL, and they'll probably be top 100 draft picks in the next 2 years. It's just, man, I'll tell you, an embarrassment of riches, I guess, is the way to put it. And I think we have to give credit where credit is due. They seem to really be missing the mark for almost a decade, trying to find the answer at Florida State, because it became clear after about 3 or 4 years that the big Jimbo Elliott thing wasn't the answer. And they were lucky. He left, got a buyout, went to Texas A&M, and he's not even there anymore. But I think they have found their man in Mike Norvell. A guy knows talent. He's just got that. You look at him, you listen to him on the interviews, and you just get this feel. I can see where he would sell to the 18, 19, even the 20, 21-year-old transfers. And they keep winning. They're back up there. And but again, answer your question, the defensive line. And I will also be watching, because the weak spot for them since Bobby Bowden bowed out has been the offensive line at Florida State. And they look to have a couple of better athletes coming in this year than they did the previous few years. If they can control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball with what they've got, yeah, they're probably a top 5 team, top 10 easily. But I'm watching the 2 lines for Florida State.
Yeah, you mentioned the offensive line. Keep an eye on their I'm going to say guard or center Maurice Smith, transferred from South Alabama. I think he's got a chance to play in the NFL. All right, let's move on to a game that probably doesn't have a whole lot of draft interest and probably shouldn't. But North Alabama against Southeast Missouri. This is the FCS kickoff game from the Crampton Bowl in Montgomery. This will be on ESPN at 6 o'clock Central Time on Saturday. I got one player here, Paul. You don't have to chime in on this. I'll just take this one. But it's Edwin White.
Yes.
Edwin White Schultz from North Alabama is a safety prospect. Was a tackle machine last year in their opener against I want to say when they played Florida State. That was in the game that Jordan Travis got hurt. White Schultz had 14 tackles from the safety position in that game. He's a local kid from Mobile, which is why I have an interest in him. He played on the same high school team with my nephew. Originally started at Kansas and transferred to North Alabama when the coach that recruited him to Kansas took the head coaching job, Brent Dearman, at North Alabama. But I don't think he's a draftable player. I think he gets in a camp and has some special teams upside. But he's a 4th-year player. No chance he's entering the NFL draft this year.
Okay. Yeah,
So
it's tough. At least they get noticed nowadays, but it's still tough. In fact, flashing back a quick second, Brian, when we talked about the lack of depth in the 2024 NFL draft, all you have to do is look at the list of undrafted rookie free agents that are on NFL rosters right now. And you will see, I'm going to say the majority of them are from the smaller FCS, Division II. They're from the smaller school teams, and I'm glad to see them get a shot, but it kind of tells you that the scouting was reaching a little bit. I wouldn't want to have been in a draft room in the NFL on day 3. So
the other game we're going to talk about at 7 o'clock on the CBS Sports Network, team I'm very intrigued by, the SMU Mustangs. They're going to be traveling to Reno, playing Nevada. Nevada named Brendan Lewis, their starting quarterback, over Chuba Purdy. That's about a couple of running backs from Nevada that Pat Garlow transferred from BC. I believe Sean Dollars transferred from Oregon. There's a couple of guys there to note. But the big prospects in this game are all for SMU, and they're a big favorite in this one. But I really love the maturation last year of their quarterback, Preston Stone. Got hurt late in the season, but he's back, was named the starting quarterback. Maybe the most intriguing prospect in this game is going to be the tight end from SMU, RJ Maryland. Third-year player. Really started to emerge a year ago. They've also got a transfer edge rusher from Miami, Jafari Harvey, to go on with Elijah Roberts, who comes back, who had a good year last year for the Mustangs. So, yeah, very intriguing prospects for SMU in this one. Maybe not as much for Nevada, but a good chance to get a look at the ponies. Is there any ACC now, Paul?
Yeah. And the strange part about that is that SMU bit the bullet, and
they're just paying their way in.
Yeah,
they're taking no money.
Their way in.
Don't give us no money for 6 years.
TV money.
We just want to be in the big show.
Yeah, I think it was 3 or 4 years. They're not going to take TV money.
Yeah, something like that. It's kind of wild. But SMU and the ACC, along with Cal and Stanford. Oh my God, college ball is so weird, so weird now. But anybody else in this game that you've got your eye on, Paul?
No, not really. Not really. I have a question.
Okay.
It's somewhat related. What are the Big 5 conferences anymore?
There are.
I only count 4. Right? But I still hear people talking about the Power 5.
The Pac-12 still technically counts as a conference, and they're technically grandfathered in, even though there's only 2 teams.
Yeah, But I thought they were playing a Mountain West schedule.
They are. It's essentially they've got the same agreement that Notre Dame has with the ACC.
ACC, yeah.
Similar to that, where they're playing a big Mountain West schedule. They have no chance to make the playoff.
Right.
I mean, either one of those teams, because they're not going to be in the top. What is it? Top 5 conference champions. Top 6 conference. I can't remember what however the rig is. Top 5 conference. However the rig is for the playoff now. The the 2-pack champion has no chance of getting in there in any way. But
it's a mess. It's a mess.
That's going to do it for our week 0 preview. Like I said, that preview will get larger as the weeks go by when we actually have a lot more games to talk about, especially starting next week where, man, that schedule in week 1, Paul, is awesome.
I know. I looked at it and I said, I thought we were supposed to get rid of these kinds of weekends with all the mergers within the conferences and stuff. Well, guess what? Not so. Yeah, it is. Yeah. That's why they call it week 0.
Yep.
It means nothing.
It's 0. It means nothing. You're right. All right. So our fun segment that, this used to be a competition between me and Shane, but now it's just me. So, but I like it so much, and it's a way for me to, get my picks out in the world. The lock of the week this week, week 0. I only had 2 games to pick from. So give me those SMU Mustangs laying 25.5 on the road, a 25.5 road favorite.
Whoa.
SMU over Nevada, laying the big number.
Wow. What's the Florida State spread?
It is currently 11. Florida State, 11 points.
Ooh, that would seem easy to me.
It should seem easy, but I was a little worried about the travel.
Okay.
A little worried about that. That's why I went with SMU.
Yeah.
And I don't think Nevada's very good.
They don't have the horses, without a doubt.
All right, so that will do it. As we have no questions on Twitter. Do we have a question? Oh, Shane has popped in. Hey,
Mr. H.
I don't know if we
proud dad.
Or not.
The proud dad. Evie turned 1 last week or whatever.
Yep. Happy birthday to Evie there, turning 1 year old. But yeah, so we didn't get anything in the Discord, nothing in the chat. So that'll do it. Final thoughts.
People will warm up to it.
They got to get back in the groove.
As I always say to you, you're a Southerner, so you can't really appreciate this, Brian. I have trouble almost through the end of September living here in Florida now, when the average high is still going to be 85 plus degrees in most of the month of September. I have trouble getting in the mood for football, being born and raised north of the Mason-Dixon line by a lot. If I don't see leaves changing and temperatures dropping, it doesn't seem like football time yet. But we'll jump in there. I think you muted yourself, dude.
It was good this morning. It was only 75 degrees here when I walked out of the house. It didn't last long, but it felt good. All right, so that's going to do it for this week's edition and the first edition of season 4 of the Draft Countdown podcast. Thanks to Paul for coming on with us. But as always, if you're following on YouTube and you're not a subscriber, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you get notified when we go live each and every week. And again, the YouTube shorts been off the charts here. Brad's been putting those up, been good stuff. If you follow us on X at Draft Countdown, follow me there at Deep Fried Draft, follow Paul there at Pigskin Paul, and follow Draft Countdown at Draft Countdown. Go to draftcountdown.com. New mock draft coming tomorrow, and including the Tuesday morning pigskin there from Pigskin Paul dropped today. But draftcountdown.com for all of your daily draft needs. For Paul, I'm Brian. Good night, everybody.